Welcome to Mostly Movies, where we mostly discuss movies, mostly. Today, I'm sorry that this video took a long time. We're going to discuss the recent Elvis film from Baz Luhrmann that was being shot a couple of years ago. It was delayed because of COVID and it finally got its release this year. And I will say, I do recommend it. I did like the movie very much. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride and sometimes a carousel about the life, particularly the life and times of Elvis and his relationship with Tom Parker. This movie is much more about Tom Parker than any Elvis film I've seen. I did briefly watch bits of the TV movie that was on, I think, in the 2000s at some point. There was the 1979 version from John Carpenter, which we'll discuss in a bit, which also is very good. But Tom Parker was always sort of a footnote in those. But in this one, Tom Hanks as the Colonel takes center stage. And it's part of Tom Hanks' recent trend of playing parts that he isn't even remotely right for, but damn it, he goes in there and he does it, and he does a bang up job. This is I think, one of his better performances in a little while, and I think he will be up for a supporting actor nomination for sure. Even though the voice is weird and even though the characterization is weird, it was kind of like when he did Mr. Rogers. It's like, yes, totally not right for this, but somehow Tom is that good of an actor where it breaks through. Now, it's basically look at Elvis, who's arguably the king of rock and roll, though not arguably to me. The film is actually very entertaining for the most part. There's a lot of really cool Baz Luhrmann elements of, these quick edits and the way that he plays with light and sound and all that. Unfortunately, I mean, it is a bummer. This film is not really that happy of a film, and it is sort of long. It's about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So this film is not an easy sit. But it's worth seeing, I feel, because I think overall the performance of Hanks and the young man playing Elvis come through so strongly that I think it's worth seeing just for those two performances more than the actual movie. And the film does play a lot with the continuity. According on which version of history you read or you watch, Elvis's dad seems to be like a nice guy in this, where it didn't seem to come off in other stories or in accounts. Now, Tom Hanks has never played an unlikable character, in my opinion, from what I've seen of his films that I have seen. I think the closest to unlikable would have to be when he played Uncle Ned on Family Ties and slapped Michael J. Fox across the room. But even then, I was kind of like, well, what did Alex B. Keaton do? But overall, I think the movie's worth seeing. Austin Butler is amazing as Elvis and definitely horns up. Check it out in the theater if you can, but be prepared. It's long and it's not the happiest of films. So we're also going to talk quickly about From the Vault, and I have this film right here from John Carpenter, the 1979 Elvis film. It was produced by Dick Clark. It was Carpenter as a director for hire. He had just done Halloween, and he was hired to do this project. And you know what? I think this movie is great. And I think the 1979 Elvis, for me personally, is my favorite Elvis biopic. And it's about the same length without the commercials. It's the same length as the Luhrmann film. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I feel that it's more even and it's more well balanced. I think Kurt Russell is fantastic as the king. And I think it's definitely one to seek out. Shout Factory did a great release. This is a Shout Factory Blu-ray. Shout Factory is one of my favorites, not just for their horror films, but for their other films that sort of get overlooked. They specialize in cult films or classic films. In the early 2000s, they remind me of a company that was called Anchor Bay, which was kind of like the Criterion Collection for cult movies. And it was a really cool group there at the time. And Shout Factory has definitely picked up the mantle in years. Their music releases are usually very fantastic. Now, for Elvis movies, we're going to very quickly go into it because I haven't seen that many of them growing up, just bits and pieces here and there. But of course, Jailhouse Rock, Viva Las Vegas. These are worthy films. I have a thing for Blue Hawaii. It's not the greatest film, but I enjoy it. Elvis was definitely a star, and I felt that he was much better than people gave him credit for on film. It's just some of the films, especially towards the end, are not so great. But back to the Carpenter film, it's not hyper stylized, but it shows you that Carpenter isn't just a great director of horror, but he can actually tackle drama in a very convincing way. And the gift that the Elvis film from '79, what that gives us is the great collaboration between director John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. They would work together four more times on Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, and Escape from L.A. I like Escape from L.A. I got to admit, it's a film. The original is incredible. I like John Carpenter's work in the '90s. I know a lot of people put him down in the '90s, but I think in the '90s he was great. You know, the '80s and the '70s are their thing, and it's very, very hard to top that. But I do enjoy a lot of his '90s work, and I love Escape from LA when I saw it in the theater, and I saw it again recently, and I still love it, even though it's like not that great and it's got a reputation. But I just love seeing Kurt Russell work in the Carpenter framework. I just love it. And I also love that he's been showing up in Tarantino movies, which is great. Later in his career, that he's been having a little bit of a resurgence, which I think is great because Kurt Russell is an extremely underrated actor. I think he's much better than he ever got credit for. For the actors of his generation, like the Harrison Fords and Willem Dafoes and guys like that, I think he's definitely in league with those guys, and I think he's really, really good. And he just never had the breaks that some other actors have had. But I think he's great, especially in The Thing, which I think is one of his best performances. Um, so definitely horns up for John Carpenter's Elvis. Seek it out. It's really, really good.